Welcome to the moment that changed everything, where we interview notable creative people to gain insights into how they got started and learn more about the moments that shaped them and their careers. Today, we chat with Paul Evans, executive producer and owner of RVK Productions.
One thing that we've learned in advertising, which they don't tell you when you get in, being creative in your own time and space to your own brief is one thing. Getting a client's brief and problem and creating with a blank page is a different beast.
Paul has held several positions at a number of Toronto agencies, including Managing Director of Chael Communications, CD of Naked Productions, and owner of the Brave Alliance. We had a great conversation covering topics such as working in a predominantly white industry as a visible minority and how hard work can sometimes trump a college education. So, Paul Evans, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Probably the best place to start for us is that, had a number of people on the show, but not that you are the first Ajacian, which is the proper term to be used for someone who comes from Ajax, the place we were both from. So, I've told this to other people. I bring people on that I have a working relationship with, and we've had many conversations, but we haven't really had a conversation about what it was like to grow up in the town that works, which used to be the town motto that was on the sign coming into Ajax. I think now it's called a commuter town, which is not any more sexy than the town that works.
It's 110,000 people now. 16,000 when we were there.
That's right. I mean, the number I remember was like 30,000. That's what in my mind I can remember rolling into town, but I believe it because, everything north of the 401 was just basically farmland.
Yeah, that's kind of where I live. I live in actually where we used to have bush parties by the old rugby place.
Why did you go to Pickering High?
I went to Dennis O'Connor to grade 12 and then graduated, and I was playing, I don't know if you knew this, but I was a badminton player. And I took a year off to play in the provincial team and to train and to give it my all my last year. And then when I came back, it was a semester system at Docks or something, and then I'm going to Pickering.
So you go to Pickering High. Where did you go to college?
Never went to college. Didn't go to college.
Whoa, all right. That sounds like there's a story in there. So what
there might
happened?
be. How much money you got, Steve?
So no college. So how did that come about? And how furious were your parents?
We couldn't afford it. I kind of thought I was going to go to university with my friends. I was raised by my grandparents. Kind of the reality of we don't have the money. So I'm like, I guess I better get a job and see if I can raise some money to go. And I started, kind of got shacked up with this girl who convinced me. Kids don't leave the house these days, Steve, but in our days you had to be out. So I was out of the house living with this girl, and she's like, well, before you go to university, why don't you see if you like what you want to do? And that's when I decided to go work in advertising, actually.
Wow. So how did that idea come to you? Like, you watching TV, or like what happened that you went, maybe I'll poke around and see what that's about, and it looks, or did you just watch advertising and think, I wonder who does that?
No, I was shitting my pants trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I'm like, wow, what can I do? I want a career. I don't want to just, work at the local store. A bunch of my friends went to work at Bell. That was kind of a blue-collar job back then, if you will, I didn't know anyone, so I couldn't get in. I'm like, I didn't know what to do. And I just remember when I was in grade 13, there was this friend of mine, we were doing a chemistry project or something, and he pulled out this thing called a portfolio. And he goes, hey, check out this. And he shows me a couple milk ads and a Coke ad. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. He goes, yeah, it's creative. And you get the thing. And I'm like, so I'm sitting there busting my brain about what to do. And I'm like, maybe advertising would be cool. And I went in the paper, found an ad for Saatchi & Saatchi.
And they posted an ad in the newspaper. Do you want to tell our listeners what a newspaper is?
Wow. Oh, what did I tell you? The starting salary, $13,500.
As a junior copywriter?
No, working in the mailroom.
Okay.
So I got into the mailroom. Cut me off, I'm blabbing too much, but
no.
Got in the mailroom, was walking around kind of figuring out what ad agencies do. And there was this one floor, they segregated the floors. It was kind of like, responsible account people up here, and then creative people on this floor, and then, admin people down here. And when you deliver the mail, there's this one floor that seemed to be having all the fun, like remote controlled cars, people like telling jokes, people like wearing like jeans and t-shirts, not suits. Everyone was just having a blast. And it was like,
yeah, you're perpetuating that whole myth about, how creative people are, successful creative people are actually what they do, Oh, you guys are just sitting around getting high, coming up with ideas.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s, it was, right? And
well, it's not I worked in the mailroom at Chiat Day when I first started, right? So, yeah, I did. The only difference between you and I is that I spent, a couple years in college before I ended up actually doing the same thing that you did for, I don't know what it was, probably not much more, maybe $20,000 a year. But when I look back at that, it's a great place to be because, your job's not that demanding. You take a lot of shit, but you're the lowest rung, but you actually get to see everything in action. And most people, you'll find most people are more than willing to talk to you about it. So that's interesting. So you started in the mailroom at Saatchi.
Yeah, I think it was a blessing because exactly what you said. You got to talk to people who were doing it at different ages. And everyone was really lovely about sharing information because you're in the house.
Yeah.
You're in the building, right?
Yeah.
So you could have great conversations and kind of talk about, what do producers do? Oh, what does your job entail?
Right. I think, both of us actually, as it turns out, returned to those agencies as a real, writer. I got my first start at Y&R through the help of Tom Gowdy, who helped me put my portfolio together when I was in the mailroom at Chiat Day, who is legendary for helping young people, put their books together, highly strategic mind and a very creative guy, great at crafting advertising, had a lot of time for that. But yeah, pretty amazing to start in the mailroom somewhere and then go away and then come back, and now all of a sudden you're working in a department that you looked from the outside at and was like, I think I want to try that. Yeah. So, you're right. That is a gift.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. And then the senior creative people back then were really generous about giving you opportunities. Like I used to go around and ask for briefs.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So who are your mentors? Who are the people who really look? A lot of people will talk to you about creative, but not too many roll up their sleeves and really get down to helping you put together your portfolio. So who is that for you?
Yeah, Jane Bongers, actually. Jane Bongers, Kate Anthony, they were kind of the ones who, everyone talked to you, everyone helped you, but Jane was the one who just said, no, you can do it. And she was teaching I don't know if she was teaching a class at OCAD at nights, and she said, well, if you want, you can come sit at the back of the room and see what it's like. And so I would go and sit in this class. Amazing. And just kind of soak things up, and she would let me try the projects, and then she would, mark my projects. And there was a creative director that was leaving, Pam Freer, and I'll never forget this because she gave me a great going away gift. And I know her kids now, and I thank them all the time whenever I see them. When she was going out, Jane had talked to her about creating a position, an assistant to the creative department. So back then you had to get images from the resource library, kind of like a creative runner, if you will.
Oh, wow.
And so that was my job for about a year. And I would do that, which meant I would walk around the halls every day asking if people had like crappy briefs they didn't want to work on, or getting people stuff. So I really got to work on stuff.
So when you took the job at Saatchi for $16,000 a year,
$13,500.
$13,000. Sorry,
I got a $1,000 raise when I went to assistant.
So did you move to Toronto at that point, or where were you living at that point?
Yeah, I was living in Toronto with my girlfriend.
Okay.
We made it mandatory to work.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
You gotta pay the rent, kid.
Yeah. Okay.
21. I have no idea.
Okay. So you talked to some people and you put a portfolio together.
Yeah, I worked on a portfolio. It was weird because I didn't know the difference between, you think anything that's produced is good and portfolio ready, right? You didn't understand that, oh no, I should put my best work in portfolio. You're like, oh no, I did this
Shows that I can do it.
Yeah, I did an announcer-read script in Red Deer, Alberta. This should go in there. It's like, no, that's the worst piece of creative you could ever put in there. But you're so proud of it, right? It's like, no, what are you talking about?
Oh, gosh.
So yeah, I put a portfolio together with the help of guys like Andrew Chang, Isidore DeBellis, Robin Heise, you mentioned.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Everyone in the department was really, really good about giving you some of their time.
Isn't it funny how, like, from the outside, you've heard this before, that, advertising is such a cutthroat business, and it's, dog eat dog and all this stuff. And that's been my experience too, is that if you're willing to ask for help, there's plenty of people who are willing to do it. And maybe that's the little bit of, advice. We'll get to advice a little bit later, but, the one, very good piece of advice is to listen and actually maybe do what they tell you that you should do.
But you're right. That's one of the misconceptions, right? You hear it's like, oh, these people, they're stabbing knives in your back. They're vicious. They're
always
alcoholics.
trying to get ahead. Yeah.
And then you go in there, and it's just a bunch of nice people who can't wait to help somebody else achieve what they've achieved. And anyway, I have a lot of love for those people.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the times when, you have a career now, you're working with clients, you're working with human beings, so it's not always going to go as expected, and there's going to be times where there's going to be tension, and sure enough, there's plenty of stories about, tension between creative departments and clients. But at the end of the day, the one, thing that I felt was such an injustice was that most of us genuinely wanted to help our clients grow their business. We wanted it to be successful. We desperately wanted that. So sometimes in a room when there'd be all this tension between what clients want and what we wanted, we were kind of after the same thing. We're, this idea that all you want to do is create a piece for your portfolio, I think is also inaccurate. I think most of us want it to work,
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that kind of, when I started in the mirror was like back in '88, and I saw that kind of change in the early '90s, that trust factor. Because to me, it seemed like guys would go into a boardroom, and I was in there, and some of the senior guys would be like, "Oh, we got to paint the bottle red," and they'd be like, "Okay, that sounds like great advice," and they would listen, and there was a real partnership. And suddenly, maybe due to overspending, and then you had the consultants come in, and then there became this mistrust. And as you say, you go into this boardroom, and if you don't have a partnership, there became this kind of, why are you trying to make us put a blue T-shirt on this guy? We need him to be in a red T-shirt. And it was like, no, I'm just trying to help you create the best communication possible because I want you to succeed. Because if you succeed, I feel good.
Yeah, and I think it can't be overstated. The downward pressure on ad budgets had a whole host of ramifications when it all came down. And we kind of lived, I would say, even during our intermediate years, we were probably living the beginnings of that. But it's like anything, I think it's like, when times are good and you're the wallet's thick, you can take more risks and you're not going to sweat it as much. Then when that wallet shrinks, now everything is critical and everybody is on the line. If it doesn't work, and then it just heightens the tension of everything, and everything really tightens up, which is, just one of the ramifications of this, ad budgets getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, there was a host of things, right? The ad budgets were getting smaller. Ad agencies, media departments started to be pulling out of ad agencies, so the revenue from that media, that 15% that was guaranteed, was shifting, and then multinationals started purchasing, and you had to, put the overhead back. So all of those factors seem to kind of shift, as you said, into a really tight sphincter.
So, okay, so you had a bunch of really great people who helped you put your stuff together. And then as you moved into your more intermediate years and stuff, like who is the best partner? I know Venderman you were with him for a while. Who is the partner that you did maybe your best work with?
Ooh, that question wasn't on my sheet, Steve.
Or was it all you? That's what you're supposed
all
to say.
Me, all the time.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good question. I guess I'll say Daniel only because we seem to hit a groove together at the right time. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, I had just been getting my style, I guess. Mm-hmm. There was a guy named Ron Thompson who really helped me and a couple other young writers go between being a junior to an intermediate and teaching us what it takes to be an intermediate. And for him, it was hard work. Up until then, it was fun. It was like, oh, I'm doing the thing, I'm solving problems, I'm having fun. And it's like, great, now you're an intermediate, you actually have to work. And that to him meant, for an ad, you'd write 1,000 headlines, you'd choose 10, and then you'd write 300 more, and then you'd choose 2 more, and then you'd get down to 6 headlines after writing, 1,000 or 2,000 headlines.
Yeah.
And prior to that, you'd write like 10 or 20 and be like, oh, I like that one, that's great. Yeah, so as I was saying, so Ron helped me become that, but my partner, Daniel, so I was just peaking, and I met Daniel, and he was kind of a young guy, just kind of coming into his own. And we kind of merged, and as you know, when you partner with somebody, you see them more than your spouse.
Right.
You see them for 10 hours, 11 hours a day in a room, sometimes like 3 feet apart. Like if you don't kind of get along, it's a long day. So he was a really nice guy, and we had a lot of similar interests. So it made working late and creating ads pretty easy. So that was kind of the partnership where we just started working. And there's an odd story where we were working at an agency together, and we started to go to another agency. And that agency only wanted to take one of us and tried to split us up.
Wow.
And it's weird how agencies do that. And we fought and we stayed together. And for a while there, we created some really good work. But I guess like all partnerships, sometimes you kind of grow.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, back to, partners, you're going to be partnered with different people throughout your career, and some you're going to get along better than others, but I feel like the closer you are personally, I think probably the most fruitful. I wouldn't say that there are certainly, I've certainly had partners that I didn't have much of a personal relationship with, and done what I would consider to be good work. But I think just like anything, it's a relationship kind of thing, and the closer you are, the more you can kind of, make mistakes, I guess, or expose really dumb ideas. You're less, you're more open. Maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, it's like you're in a foxhole, right? You're in a foxhole with this other person, male or female, and you're like, can I trust this person? Can I bare my soul? Will they laugh at me? All of that stuff where you go through as an intermediate. That's the growth part where you're kind of trying to figure yourself out. You don't want to be laughed at. You don't want to look like an idiot. You don't want to, all that kind of stuff. So having a relationship with someone like that then is more important than when you're a senior, because when you're a senior, you're kind of, you know what you're doing. You're locked in. You can work with anyone. So that was kind of important for us. The odd thing was that we never spent time together outside of work.
Okay, sure.
And it was I kind of thought it was weird, but then I kind of understood. If you're seeing someone
Did you try to make that happen?
Yeah.
You'd invite Dan somewhere, and he'd be like, "No, I'm good."
He was kind of a bit of a homebody. Like I think maybe we had dinner 3 or 4 times in 5 or 6 years. We took a road trip once, which was crazy. It's just.
I honestly, I'm kind of that mind too, that I like, work to be the place that, I hang out with people. Very few people I would, leave work and, on a personal level, do that type of thing. I think the one big illustration of that, I can remember when I was working at Shy Day, we got a special discount at a health club called Curzon's. Do you remember Curzon's?
I remember that, yeah.
So Curzon's, they had a club at what was then Skydo, right? So close to the agency down at Spadina in front. And I can remember, this is a great idea. I mean, I'm kind of trying to be health conscious, and I'm trying to get out there and do it, and it's nice and close. It's a good discount. It was a nice club, right? And everyone at the agency who was also like-minded would then go to the club. And I remember how bad that went when I saw the president in the shower. Like I went into the men's room to use the facilities, and there's my what for all intents and purposes my boss standing there nude, and I was like, I'm not sure this is a great idea. It's like two worlds colliding. As you got your personal life and you got your work life, and you don't want to be in a meeting going, hey, just saw you naked.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I was impressed, sir, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
Review time's coming up.
Yeah. So So now you are owner and executive producer at RVK Productions.
Yeah.
So maybe one of the loose connections between NAC and one of the shows that you're working on is My Job Rocks, which is a show that I'll let you describe, but generally speaking, it's a show that shows kids different types of jobs and maybe something that they might be interested in pursuing when they get older. So, and we have a lot of, young people, at NAC who are looking to get into the business. So tell us more about RVK and what goes on there.
RVK. So RVK is, we produce television shows and digital content and also like apps and websites that kind of correlate with the show. It was interesting because, sitting around, at some point you get older and you kind of want to do something more than advertising. You've been doing it a long time. You kind of want a new challenge, and this challenge came up, and it's some of the skills are transferable, right? You're creative, as a creative director, you're great in meetings, you're great in structure, you're great in organizing stuff, great at running departments and budgets, all of those kind of things, which is kind of a mini production. And then in your day, you may have directed a couple commercials. I believe, and I'm sure you believe this too, at a certain point, as a senior person, art director and writer, they start to kind of blur because you're a creative person, and you have sensibilities in both to a certain point. So when this opportunity came up to produce this content, again, it started with one project, and I have at the time I had a teenager. He was 16, I think, so in high school, and I remember trying to talk to him about his career or his life or where he's going, and it's like, they don't want to talk to you.
No, they don't want to talk to their dad about that.
No.
They'll talk to another old guy about that, but not their dad.
They'll talk to anyone. They'll talk to the guy at McDonald's about that, but they won't talk to their parents. So I thought of this job, and I remember how lost I was, and I thought this My Job Rocks would be a great introduction for these kids. And the idea of the show is, as you said, is we sit down and we interview people from different careers, and we explain to kids how to get into that career. And we create this animated chart on the mountain so you can get up the mountain. And sometimes you need a secondary education, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you need certification, sometimes you don't. And then there's all of these traits that go along with the job, and you can kind of align up your traits and kind of get a sense, maybe I do want to be an air traffic controller. And then I created an app that would ask a series of questions and then would recommend a career for you, which was kind of a neat thing. And the reason for those two things is, hey, son, why don't you try this out and figure out where you want to be? And it kind of worked. At one point, he wanted to be a 3D graphic designer.
Okay.
Special effects graphic designer.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, celebration. But he changed his mind.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, before we got to recording this, you had mentioned that you didn't want any of your kids to get into advertising. So I was going to say, so My Job Rocks. You haven't had an ad guy on there, kind of, showing the kids, a business that they might get into. Probably not. Why don't
I think
you?
We did had an ad guy in there somewhere, but
yeah. And what was the reason why? Why didn't you want your kids to get into advertising?
I just think it's changed a lot, and I don't know if Canadian advertising is going to thrive the way it did when we worked in it back in the day. And I think it's just adjusted, and it's going to be a little smaller, because I believe a lot of the content from the U.S. can run in Canada. Quite simply, there's that whole belief that there's two different targets. Is it as much of a difference these days? Although with Trump in office, I have to say I don't know about that stuff. But
I think what's interesting about the work in the U.S. or anywhere for that matter, good work everybody can get behind, and usually because good work comes from a universal insight that resonates with everyone. I think the knock from maybe Canadian advertising, and when they look at U.S. advertising, it's like, oh my God, the shit is really shit. Which I'm not sure if that matters. So much. I mean, you could say, yeah, they're doing more volume, but then again, it's a bigger country with a lot more people creating a lot more advertising. Correct, so that makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, it's true that everybody would watch the Super Bowl wait for those ads to come up, look at them and go, wow, pretty amazing. Whether you're Canadian or American or Scandinavian, it probably doesn't matter that, that if you have something that's built on a universal, the small little differences in culture probably don't matter.
Yeah, and the other thing, sorry to go back, but one of the other points was it's all consuming. Once you're in the advertising cloud, it consumes your life.
Yeah.
In the sense that you'll relate to this. You have to be an ad geek. You read every book, every award show. You're dialed into every client, every ad. That's like you have to be 120% committed in it, and you can't dabble in it.
Yeah.
And those who dabble don't succeed. The guys and girls who go head first.
Yeah.
And that can affect your marriage. That can affect having kids. That can affect your social life. And
For sure.
you have to make that commitment. And then I think if you're going to make that commitment, then you probably are someday going to leave Toronto and go to the States or go to another country if you're really going to push yourself creatively. And so I didn't think my son was going to be able to make that sort of commitment to it. And I'm not sure if I wanted him to make that sort of a commitment for a career, because you almost kind of put life on the back burner, career on the front burner.
Yeah, I remember, a couple comments that I'll make about that are one that I would love to be the type of person who can go and experience other creative things like art galleries and so on to find inspiration on how to be better at being an ad practitioner. But that was certainly not my experience. Like I was like deep dive into the craft of advertising, and I wasn't the type to go to art galleries or different creative places for sources of it. I always found going back to this, and one of our ex-bosses, Duncan Bruce, used to call them the Playboys, which were all the ad annuals that you would break out the Playboys and to get fired up to kind of look at someone who's done it really, really well and try to somehow emulate that in some way.
100%.
Yeah,
like I remember
sure.
every year I'd buy myself this communication arts annual because it was only $28 as opposed to the one show, which was $110.
Yeah.
And that was my Christmas gift to myself.
Yeah.
And you would go through that book probably in a couple months because you would spend a couple days on every ad. What was the strategy? What was he doing? What could he have written that different? You just loved it so much.
And
right?
I would just hate myself by the end. Honest to God, I would look at that stuff and I go, God damn, that's so good. How can I be that good? I think everybody has those campaigns that they've looked at and they've just gone, oh my gosh, how could I, how could I ever get there? And there's so many, but I can remember, I forget what year it was, and it was out of the U.S., but there's a whole campaign for, I want to say ABC. And and it was like a yellow backdrop with the ABC logo and just headlines, which I loved because the craft of it was just so disciplined. And one of the headlines was, if TV is so bad for you, why do they have one in every hospital room? Exactly. And I was like, that is just like, that is like the best. I mean, that is just so good. It's entertaining, it's tight, it's well written, it's simple, and it makes you think, right? Like it's brilliant. It's just a great, and I don't know what the team was, or who the team was that did that campaign, but they had others in that campaign that were just so good. Love that. I love that discipline. I think maybe print advertising is the one that I've always maybe struggled most with because I think it's so hard. Worked 13 years at a radio production company, and I think the radio write is still one of the toughest.
You were always a good radio writer. I remember that back in China, you'd write the stuff and be like, hey, I just do this, like, fuck, Steve, that's good, man. It's like, holy cow.
You know
You're
what?
Like, really? You like that? I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
Well, thanks for saying. I think where it came from was I just loved it so much. I mean, I've told other people this too. Television, I didn't mind writing television, but the production aspect of it just made me want to lose. I lost my will through it because it was such a long process. Yeah. I didn't want to sit in an editing room week after week, rough cut, fine cut, revisions, And then, finally to get to the audio side took forever. And that, of course, by the end of that, I just found like I wasn't into the project anymore. And what I loved about radio, in part, not just that it was kind of a writer's medium solely, not that art directors don't get involved, and some very good art directors can very much help you. So not to suggest that, but what I loved about it was you went into a room, and several hours later you were done, and you could just do your best in those several hours, and it was over. So the idea was, crisp and new, and you were engaged for a very, tight amount of time where you could be intense, but then it was over. Television production was just endless, right?
I'm laughing because the caveat to that is we've all been in the radio recording studio where you have, the art director showing up for lunch, and the client has shown up, and 3 clients have shown up, and the engineer or the writer, you're in there crafting, and you're like, buy Tide now, and then someone in the background goes, I don't know, can you put more of a smile on buy? And it'd be like,
honestly,
everyone would just have to get their 2 words in, and then that radio production would turn into like a nightmare.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think one of I've had a bunch of tough sessions during that time. Some great sessions, but a handful of really tough ones. I think the toughest session I ever had was for like Ultralux. It was for toilet paper or something like that. Right?
That was not my client.
Yeah, that's right.
It was not
and,
me.
And literally, we had to do a line that was maybe maybe 5 words, right? It was like for the softest, whatever ever, something very short. And in walked everyone from the client side and the agency, and it was packed. Yeah. You had we had a sofa in front of the recording studio, and the sofa had 8. There were people sitting on the armrests, watching this one actor say a collection of 5 words. Now, listen. There is a way to do it, and of course you're going to do a few passes and maybe get to a good place. Yeah. I think we did 50 takes.
Yeah.
At that point, it is so difficult, especially for the actor. At that point, it's difficult for the director too, because you're literally going, I'm not sure what we're doing anymore.
It's white noise, right?
But the actor is off in the woods, deep woods now. They're in the corn. They don't know what to do. Yeah. They don't know whether to shit or steal third.
Can you give it to me more like a 16-year-old really excited?
Yeah.
Funny on that, there's a really talented voice person we use, Kara Volkov. We do some stuff, and she told me the story from the other side, being the talent. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you put us in this glass room, we're sitting in there, we're just sweating, and we look on the other side, and there's like 15 of you people, and you're all like munching your snacks and drinking your water. Would somebody offer us some water? No. And
you're a rented mule.
Exactly.
Right? And I think the other thing, because I would have the opportunity to do some voice work, and so I would be on the other side, and what I always wanted to tell actors is, because they're sitting there, they're doing their thing, they'll do a few passes, there'll be a long silence, and you'll see everybody on the other side of the glass talking, and you think it's about you, and it's probably about lunch.
Yeah.
Like they're literally going, what are you going to have, the Thai food? I'll split a spring roll with you.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Jimmy's coming, get him a spring roll.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It has nothing, usually has nothing to do with your performance and everything to do with like what everybody else wants to do at that point. But, and sometimes, now that I'm not working there anymore, but, sometimes what I would do is I would sneak my finger over and I press the talk back button
so they could hear,
so that the actors could so I could alleviate some of that tension. Mm-hmm. Just so you guys know they're just talking about lunch right now, and you don't have to get wired about what's happening. Yeah. Or someone, or the clients arrived and they're just doing the glad handing, they're just saying hello and all that kind of stuff. So don't worry.
Because again, they're creative people who just want to help the process and do the best they do. So they're sitting there going, how can we help? What are we doing? And you just sit in there and don't, give me 20 more takes.
You will speak to you. You don't respond until spoken to. How about that? Yeah. And no lunch.
You have no input. No input. Yeah.
So you didn't go right from writing to RVK. You kind of did a gradual move into production.
Well, no, I went from working in an ad agency, all the way up to creative director to started my own agency, and I did that for a couple of years, which was a pretty cool experience with a really cool client. And then had a really bad ad experience, and then just decided I didn't want to work in advertising anymore.
You were scarred.
I was scarred, and it was just it was just bad. It was everything that it was just horrible. So then I thought, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. And luckily, we live kind of modestly out in the suburbs of Ajax, so I was able to take some time off and kind of just expose myself to many things to figure out what I wanted to do. And then that's when the opportunity kind of arose. And it took like a year and a half kind of to figure it out.
Wow.
And then once I got into it, never happier, because then it was really odd. And you actually would produce something, and people would walk up and say, "Hey, thank you. That's really good." And be like, "Thank you. Wow, I've never heard thank you in about 15 years." Or you got to be able to help people. Like some of the athletes we did for one of our shows, Future Legends, they would take the work and they would get scholarships by them, and they would call us up and send a message going, "Hey, thank you. You really helped my kid." And I'd be like, or you started to get those messages from My Job Rocks, and you were like, "Oh wow, this is kind of what I'm using my creative for good," kind of thing. And it was kind of.
So having your own agency, I guess you were really getting your hands dirty in terms of production. You must have been heavily involved.
Yeah. There was a client that when I worked at an agency, he didn't have a big budget, and so we figured out that in the field that he needed to work in, television was important, but we couldn't afford to do television. So we had to kind of get creative on the budget. I had to direct. We had to pull some favors, and we were able to get him what he needed. So then when I went on my own, he remembered that. He's like, I need your help again. It became a real partnership, and as you said, challenging budgets, you can still do television if that's where your target lives. You just have to be really smart and creative about it. So that's was an experience in producing a bunch of spots for him cost effectively that kind of, at the end of the day, shot us in the foot, because the strategy we created, the U.S. then picked it up and they said, "Oh, great, we'll start doing stuff in the U.S. with all of our money," and then was like, I don't need you guys to do that kind of stuff anymore, which is.
I forget who said this to me, but the comment was, the first day you start working with your client is the first day you start losing that client, because it is a tough business to retain. When I see agencies that have long standing relationships with clients, I kind of marvel at it, because it is so difficult to, everyone's familiar with, new personnel that rolls in on a specific client, and then all of a sudden they want to make big changes, and sometimes that's just too tough for an agency to navigate and retain. But some of these agencies that have long standing relationships,
I think some of those relationships are, like you look at Nike and Whiting Kennedy, they have those long relationships because there's a trust and a partnership. Because the clients get what good advertising is, and they get, "Oh, we're a professional, you're a professional, let's use both our powers to do great stuff." And some clients don't really understand or get advertising, and their way of doing advertising is throwing money at it,
right?
Or volume.
Yeah, and I think I agree with this this idea that there are more than one answers for a lot of clients. There is a whole bunch of ways to go. It's just the nature of things, but often not as many as people think. And so for an agency to grind out a strategy that really is solid, it makes sense, and then having the experience over time of watching it evolve is probably much better than trying to change. Clients are human beings, and we're all guilty of it. We all want to do something different instead of maintaining and staying the course and then growing over time with something that we think that we're really about. But well, you worked at McLaren for a while. Long-standing relationship with General Motors, and tons of time, and Day, long relationship with Nissan. So yeah, that's amazing. So one of the questions that I ask all the guests that come on is,
I wear boxers, Steve.
That's right. I know. I didn't ask Jana that, so I'll have to see about that.
She wears boxers too.
Jana, if you're listening.
All ad people wear boxers.
Yeah. What's the freakiest client story you've ever had? I can remember. I wasn't at the agency at the time, but at Y&R, there was one art director who actually tried to choke his writer over a creative difference. It was like, no, that's not a client story, but What would you say the most interesting story you have about, working with people in advertising?
Oh,
I know I added that on there, so you must have.
what number is it, Steve? Like, I mean,
I've got a different list now.
because
I thought you would have one right away.
I do have a bunch of stories, but I wasn't sure, again, if it was, can I tell like kind of a bit of a racial story? Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
You sure? So when I was in Saatchi, this was kind of 90, 91. I was just a junior, 23, 24, something like that. And, getting my chops up and that sort of thing. And there was a creative director, I won't say her name, unless from New York, who ran the Tide business.
Okay.
And then she comes walking down the hall, and she's like, "Oh, Paul, can I get your time for a bit? I wouldn't mind, we're launching the new Tide. This is when they took it down to compact Tide, and I wouldn't mind getting your opinion on it." I'm like, "Oh," so back straightens up. I was doing well. I think I won an award at that point, feeling really good about myself. I'm like, "Oh, great, this is great." We go in a boardroom. She puts in the old tape, plays it for 30 seconds, kind of look at it, start to critique it, and then she looks at me and goes, "How do your people feel about that? Would they be offended?"
1,000, 1,000, 1,000.
Well, she was a lovely lady who didn't mean much, but I started laughing, and I'm like, "You know what, Marie?" I'm like, "I think my people are going to be okay with it." And she goes, "Oh, thank God. I was so worried we would offend them." And that was the meeting.
So what was the concept you think that would be racially offensive?
It just had a bunch of images and the way it kind of, I have no idea.
I mean, I'm sure everybody in the commercial was white. Maybe that was it.
It was 100% everyone. Back then, I would even get this. I worked on NBA. We launched NBA gear, and we shot a bunch of stuff in the rural kind of projects, and they said it was too ethnic. We need to get more white people in there. And so back then, they used to call it a California casting. Being a writer and being told that you have to have a California casting by your producer is a bit kind of offensive, but you don't want to rock the boat. I think there were so few ethnic people in advertising back then. They were just trying to get a mini focus group, right? Trying to understand there was something different going on.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. Like how was that experience for you? I'm assuming that it added a layer of difficulty for you. Look, we were at the same time. We were working at the same time. I have to agree. There wasn't a lot of non-white people working in creative departments. Not even the whole agency.
Yeah, the whole agency. Yeah.
So what was that like for you? Difficult, right?
Well, difficult in the sense that, there was a lot of, this whole politically incorrectness thing didn't start happening until the mid-2000s, right? So back then it was a lot of like racial jokes that you had to take in, being different. So you'd come in with something different and people were like, whoa, that's a little too racist.
Clearly because you're not white.
Yeah, or you'd be doing like soft drink ads or like stuff like that, and people like, we've got to, this is got to be white and clean. So it was hard to change your creative sensibilities to mask that of the rest of the department, because that's what your creative director wanted or the senior person wanted. And when you stepped outside the line, people thought that it was kind of gibberish, or they weren't willing to expose the client to some of that stuff, and the clients weren't, for the most part, looking for that kind of stuff.
I mean, I make the correlation between your experience and women. I had Jana Peck on the show. We talked a little bit about this. When Elspeth and Lorraine ended up creating their own agency and then just went on a tear creatively. They were like winning everywhere, and they brought a sensibility that was new and different, and everyone really looked at it and respected it. And I think that for a lot of females that were working in advertising, they really got a chance to see something that they could aim for, and that's important, I think.
Well, I think absolutely. I think they opened advertising's eyes to, there are different targets who have different sensibilities, and they don't all want to be talked to as if they're a white male.
Yeah, and it's just so unbelievable to think that every brief that we've ever gotten for any for most products and services, the person making the purchase decision is the female in the household, and yet all of the advertising is being created by middle-aged white guys.
Yeah, who live in the suburbs trying to be cool, and it was so that was kind of really odd. And occasionally you'd get into an agency can be a bit like Survivor, right? You're on the island and people start jostling for positions and stuff like that, and a lot of the times you were the odd man left out because you were the guy that was the easiest to knock off, so to speak. And so that would happen occasionally. But that being said, there were people that were just who saw no color and were fantastic, and a lot of South Africans that helped me, which is kind of weird because you grew up, South Africa, that's the apartheid, and they would come here and they'd be the most welcoming people. So it was there. I think one of the interesting things for me is I went to an award show, and you go to these award shows and you're looking around and you realize, hey, I'm the only black guy, and it's there's two other black guys, and I meet these guys, Michael Griffith and Michael Ayers-Mendez,
who are amazing guys and a great team at Shite Day.
But I hadn't seen black guys before, so I just walked over and go, hey, I'm another black guy. What's going on? And they're like, oh, what are you doing? And they had been doing retail and doing really well and doing some smart stuff, but you didn't realize that. And the other thing you didn't realize is, and a photographer said this to me once, I was associate creative director at Publicis, 29 kind of deal. And he goes, you're the most senior black person in Canada. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Dude,
was that a fact?
It was a fact.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
He goes, it's a fact. I'm like, whoa. And he meant in mass advertising. So in direct mail and other agencies like that, there may have been more senior, but in a mainstream ad agency, and that kind of freaked me out.
Yeah. How long did did you get up at 3 a.m. and we were thinking about that?
Yeah, it's just like, do I have a responsibility? What do? I don't know what I'm doing. I was just making ads. I don't know what's going on. I thought we were just making some good ads.
Doing the same job, I guess. So.
And then that started to affect the way you kind of looked at things. And then a lot of things that I would just kind of cave into as I don't get advertising or I don't know it. I started to kind of go, no, maybe I am a little bit better than I thought, and I can stand up for myself a little bit more.
I usually wrap up by kind of going, what's going on right now? What are you doing now that that you're excited about, and what's going on in your life?
So I just took a sabbatical for the last year. Like I said, we ended up doing 26 projects in a row, and I knew it was time. I was in the south of France going to this show, and my wife said something, I lost it, and I was like, oh, you're a dick. And I went for a walk, and I realized you're just burnt out. Like you just, I'm sure you've been there where you could just keep going and writing and producing and doing stuff and really liking the work that you're doing, but you got to take a break. We all have to take a break. You need to recharge. And so I'm taking a year off, and I kind of figured out what I want to do next, and I'm lucky that I can do it. So I'm working on a couple small pilots, which are just kind of fun, working with some young people, which I really enjoy working with, and then working on a really heavy scripted comedy that would be kind of the holy grail, which no one may ever buy, but kind of gonna try to take my game to the next level. Done a lot of non-scripted stuff, so I'm working into the scripted stuff.
Yeah, so many, I think, writers, because we're called on to make something funny a lot of the time, because drama is tough to do in small formats like 30 seconds and stuff. So comedy is something that you lean on. I had Chris Hirsch on here who talked about watching Saturday Night Live and going, oh my God, I wonder if I could have a job where my whole job was just to do funny stuff, and advertising. There's a bunch of advertising that's like that, right? You kind of wrap the cell in this joke, and it'll get noticed and hopefully work. So it's great to hear that you're gonna do the purely entertainment thing, because I'm definitely afraid of that too. It's not funny is hard.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that we've learned in advertising, which they don't tell you when you get in, and which is a valid point for anyone, is being creative in your own time and space to your own brief is one thing. Getting a client's brief and problem and creating with a blank page is a different beast, as you would agree. And furthermore, having to go back at that brief 6 or 7 different times is kind of what we've learned in our careers to be able to attack a problem 150 different ways. That's what they don't warn you about in advertising, which is if you want to succeed, having that drive, if you want to keep going. That's what makes good creative people, right? You just never give up. Bit of stubbornness, I guess, right?
That's great.
That's
good. You know, I think that's our that's going to be, you know, we pull a quote from each of the episodes, and we kind of trying to, you know, we're working on the structure, but that's good because that's great advice for any young person who wants.
I had to contribute something. I was just talking to my ass for a couple of
Well, I almost feel bad. You got all these you got all this stuff written down, and I don't even know if I touched barely anything.
No, you didn't. You went off script. I'm like, I didn't talk about that.
Listen, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your stories, and it's been great to chat with you because we never really get a chance to do this.
Yeah, and let's go out for a drink in the future. It'd be fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
This episode has been brought to you by the National Advertising Challenge, North America's only brief-based challenge that sends winners to Cannes, France.